Hi everybody, Kirsten Lovett here, and just wanted to say hi to everyone and tell you a little bit about what I've been doing, and in hopes that maybe it'll bring some meaning into your studies as well, in terms of the relationship you have with nature, and maybe some of you will find this interesting and helpful. I hope that it'll be helpful. Um, I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about some of the research I've been doing, but also I'm doing two things at the same time right now, getting ready for this webinar, which I still don't have a date for yet, but um, it's basically about water and some of my experiences around water, and there's a portion of it that's mostly different kinds of experiences that I've had around water, and I kind of talk about that a while. But then I also have some research that I've done with this particular book about a place called Crystal River, which is in Florida here. And I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about that today, um, just to kind of, bring some kind of tangible geography into it, as well as history that, might possibly support some of the experiences I've had, and maybe some of you have had experiences as well, and maybe this will bring some kind of meaning into your lives as well as it has mine. Either way, it's pretty interesting stuff. Um, so I just wanted to go over some things. This is just a little blurb from some of the webinar I'm going to be talking about. In terms of psychic communication, uh, which sometimes happens when I'm out on a walk, especially if I'm trying to stay tuned in to nature. Um, for example, I'm sure a lot of you have seen a lot of my posts about that. So on a psychic communication level, I have found that nature spirits will communicate, especially if there's a sacred water source nearby. And this is one of the reasons I wanted to find out about sacred places such as Crystal River here in Florida. It's not unusual to have a river located near a sacred site. That's a very interesting general observation I've made. Some of you might have seen a year ago when I was researching about Stonehenge. I did a webinar on that. It was within a Sacred Sites webinar. And in it, I talked about how the Avon River, River Avon, had a large role in the funerary rituals near Stonehenge. And kind of to bring that into the present now, I thought of this example when I was doing research recently about Crystal River here in Florida, and I noticed a similar concept, that the river, in this case Crystal River here, is near several mounds at Crystal River which served in a ritual capacity. And so if you keep that in mind, I love pointing out similarities between different cultures in different geographical regions, but some concepts remain similar. And in this case, we focus on the river just happened coincidentally to be near where some mounds were built, or a ritual place that was sacred and is still sacred in this case. So getting back to Crystal River, I just wanted to read a couple passages from this book that was found for me, also interestingly enough through a shamanic journey, getting off the subject a little bit here, but the reason I found this book was actually through a joint process with Marissa, where we did a shamanic journey. And I'm sure some of you have participated in the shamanic journeys she's done prior to this. And on this particular shamanic journey, I didn't have really a specific goal in mind, but I did have kind of questions in my mind before the journey started. And it led me to a place in a library that luckily I was able to ask Marissa for help in terms of using her guides as well to retrieve this particular book. So it was kind of like a team effort in terms of finding this book that became such a wonderful, um, it's more of an anthropological book, of course, but it did give me some clues. And so that was interesting. I thought it was a very interesting way of finding information. And it doesn't always happen like that, but every once in a while it's pretty cool. So, in this book, which is, by the way, called New Histories of Village Life at Crystal River by Thomas Pluckhahn and Victor Thompson, and they just published it last year, 2018. So, I just want to bring up this one quote here. He says, the emphasis on competition and economics in the choice of settlement location, he's talking about Crystal River and some of the mounds, belies the possibility that the location of Crystal River, especially its proximity to the springs, might have been equally important for religious or spiritual reasons. From such evidence, this other anthropologist called Pocketot suggests that the Middle Woodland period, that's the period of time that the Crystal River archaeological site was in prominence, was characterized by, quote, relational ontologies wherein juxtapositions of powers and people, which I don't care about that as much, were central, and this is the important part, and where agency was vested in places, things, and bodies other than people. And I'm emphasizing that so that we can ignore the first part of it, because that's mostly about competition and societies, and that's interesting and everything. But the part that was interesting to me was that even an anthropologist such as Pluckhahn and Thompson talks about an animistic concept, which is a belief system and a structural society system where great importance was vested in places, things, and bodies other than people. And so that's huge, because usually you hear that sort of thing, you don't hear it a whole lot in academic circles, but I think it's becoming more common now, which is, I think, a wonderful kind of tie-in to get the science community to kind of come on board with the animistic community. So I just want to read one other quote to you, and then I'll wrap it up for now. But this is another quote from the same book, from Pluckhahn and Thompson. And this is about a mound in particular. There's several mounds that they talk about that are right near the river, if you can picture that. They say that we suspect the mound was intended primarily for other purposes. Specifically, the placement of the mound on a low spot near the river suggests to us that it was built to be seen rather than to see from its summit. And so that's another, I think, interesting thing that kind of places importance on the place. So if we're looking at it as not an idea where you would think of it in a military way, where you build a mound so you can see out from it to onlookers, which is how I think the go-to idea that a lot of modern people would say, oh yeah, they built it so they could see out. But in this case, it was the opposite. They built it to be seen from the outside. So I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about that, and without getting too much into that particular book, but I did want to weave a few thoughts from these anthropologists and archaeologists who are from, they published through University of Florida in Gainesville, and I thought it kind of tied in a little bit to this idea of a river being near a sacred site and having that being part of also some clues as to why sometimes, if I take my own observations and in nature, especially on an energetic and spiritual and consciousness level, it's tended to be quite profound at a body of water, especially a body of water that maybe has a past history in being honored for ceremonial purposes. So I hope I hope all of you are well, and I hope this was interesting to you. It's just kind of what I'm into right now. The summer seems to bring about a time to think about the weather, of course. We're in the summertime down here in Florida. It's always kind of in the back of everyone's mind. So let me know if you guys have any questions or anything. I don't have an exact date for the upcoming webinar, but I am working on it, and I hope that hope to get you a date soon. And thank you for all your support, and hope you all have a wonderful weekend. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. Thank you.